What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do?
Hello everyone, it's Petty Officer Romero again from Job Corps with another training video. We have spoken in the past about appearance, about the way you carry yourself, about the professionalism that you present to others, the way you interact with society when you're on the job, either as a police officer, security, or military security / police. And today's subject is something where everything kind of ties together. And the subject of today's training video, that's right, witness interviews. One of the things that you'll realize is that there is, especially in security, and even as a police officer, that is the main part of your job, is to go out, you investigate things that went on. You see things that happen, you write reports, and the way you get the information for that report is interviewing the people who saw what happened, because obviously not every time you'll be in a position to be able to see or witness something that happened. So many times, you know, whether it's something simple or something severe, you're going to have to figure out a way to get the most accurate picture you can from the people who saw it. And you have to become really good at it. So one of the things that I would initially do is give you some basic understanding, and then we'll get into the textbook and get some ideas of how textbook looks at it, and see how you feel about it. All right, so the first thing we would want to do in any situation is you're going to want to separate the witnesses. Now, keep in mind that, especially like, let's say that you're at a shopping center or a mall or something where there might have been 10 or 12, 15 witnesses. First thing you want to do is make sure that you can identify the witnesses and ask them to stay. Now, if you've watched the legal videos that I've made, do not tell people that they have to stay, because that could be misconstrued as an arrest or detainment and get yourself in trouble. But if you ask someone, I would love to be able to get some information from you. Could you please hang out and let me interview a few people, and then I will talk to you. Just be a few minutes if you wouldn't mind. Now you're asking for their cooperation, because you don't want to start talking to one person and have 10 people disappear, and then really you don't know which one was the best witness until you get to it. So you might want to make some general questions to the crowd. Who saw anything? Who knows what went on? And depending on the situation, you know, did anyone see what happened? And there will be some people like, well, I kind of saw, or, oh, I saw the whole thing. And obviously you want to determine who you're going to talk to in that situation by who you feel may be able to provide the most information. Pretty much common sense. But again, do not tell anyone that they have to stay and that they can't go anywhere, because you can get yourself in a whole lot of trouble doing that. So once you start doing the interviews, you want to separate your witnesses. So now you're going to have, because what you don't want to have is people hearing one person say something, and then it kind of paints a picture in their mind. Maybe you end up with a bunch of stories that are the same, not because that's what they saw, but because it's what they heard somebody else see, or what they saw, or what they felt happened. So you always want to ask yourself the 5 W's. And what's funny is it's who, what, where, when, why, and then they throw in how. So it's the 5 W's and the H. So those things are what will lead you down the path to be able to get all the information. If you make sure you touch on all 5 of those subjects and the how, you will get the answers that you need. You're always going to want to keep control of the situation, and that's when I mentioned to you that you're going to want to professionally ask people if they wouldn't mind staying, so that you could get a statement from them, gather some information, and that's part of control. That's part of making sure that you can get the information that you need, and doing it in a professional way. Another thing is going to be that obviously your demeanor and being friendly is important. You're going to want to talk to them in a way that they feel not harassed. You're not going to want to You're not going to want to be aggressive. You're not going to want to be judgmental when you're interviewing witnesses. They're not on trial. So if they say something that maybe from what you gathered so far is not accurate, you don't want to say, like, come on, are you serious? Like, that's not what I think happened, or that's not what everybody else is saying. You want to gather as much information as possible. And if 5 people say that the guy in the red shirt hit the other person, and that person says, no, the guy in the red shirt didn't do anything, you're going to want to document that, and that's what you're going to share. You're not there to interrogate the witnesses. You're just there to gather information. You're also going to want to make sure that that you get thorough descriptions, okay? You're going to want to make sure that what people were wearing, what time of day it was. And we've talked about this before. The details matter. I always say, what if you were creating a movie? You're going to want to ask yourself, as you create this movie in your head, what would the people watching this movie want to know? So when a witness says, well, he hit the guy and then he took off running that way, and then you say, okay, and so what time was it? Would that make the most sense? What you're doing is you're saying, oh, okay, so the guy went that way. Which direction did he go? Did he go down this street? Did he go through the alley? What was he wearing? So the point is that you just want to make sure that as someone says something, you're walking down the path that they're leading you to get the information from what they saw, because you might have one witness that saw where the person went. You have another witness that saw mostly what happened in the incident. So that's the information you want to gather from them. Then other witness, maybe they got there when it was all over, but saw the guy taking off running. So if you see what I'm saying, you're going to make sure that wherever the witness goes, walk them down that path and get all the information from that path. And then when you're done, you've painted a full picture of everything that happened. All right. So in addition, you're going to want to find out if there was a vehicle involved. You're going to find out there's a weapon involved. Obviously, if someone says there's a weapon, what they do with the weapon, because many times what happens with that weapon is going to have, meaning if they tried to dispose of the weapon, or if you saw them throw the weapon in a trash can, or as they were running, they threw it or discarded it, that's always a big issue. So you want to make sure that if someone saw a weapon that, I'm saying these things, and to me it's just obvious. You want to make sure you note it. You want to make sure that it's reported and followed up on, because if you can find out that, man, he threw that weapon in a trash can, then obviously you're going to want to go secure that trash can. You're not going to really want to go digging through it. You want to make sure that nobody comes, takes the trash out, or starts messing with it, or maybe somebody's there, says, man, I could use a gun, and goes over there. So keep that in mind. All right, so we talked about interviews on site, where the crime scene or the accident scene happened, but let's talk a little bit about focused interviews. Focused interviews are going to be where you've gathered enough information, and unlike interviewing witnesses or a victim, you are now interviewing a suspect. Now, these interviews can't be done until a substantial amount of information is gathered that tells you that you have a very likely probability that this person may have been involved in perpetrating a crime. Okay, so in other words, you can't just drag someone in there because they look shady and start interrogating them. So you have to have, based on either witness accounts or video or something that says, look, there's a high probability this person is a person of interest, and bring those guys in there and start with a different type of interview, interview that might be a little bit more aggressive. Now, these types of interviews, while I'm bringing them up in this meeting and we're talking about them in general, they need to be conducted by a professional with lots of experience and understanding of not only how to conduct these types of interviews, but also understand the nuances and legalities of when you bring a suspect into a situation where you're now, I don't know, even accusing them, bringing up details that might be, I don't know how to say it other than being aggressive, like you're trying to get a confession out of the person. So there's a lot of legal issues when you start detaining a person and start asking them aggressive questions that could be seen or perceived as accusing them of a crime. So you just have to be very cautious, and that's why this is something that, while we're touching on it, obviously not something that you're going to want to do if you're maybe either a patrol officer or if you are a security officer specifically. It's one thing that you can have a lot of responsibilities, be responsible for the security of a large corporation, but at the same time you want to be very careful about taking someone, detaining them because of the legalities of the perceived arrest, and then two, being aggressive with them and accusing them of something that you're not certain they were accused of or are guilty of. And another issue is maybe they were guilty of something, but if you don't do it the right way and make sure that their rights are protected, then you could destroy the entire case. So it's obviously something that needs to be handled by professionals. Okay, so but let's talk a little bit about what they should do. You want to be non-accusatory. You know, we talked about that. It's a skill. A skill when you take a person and you start interrogating them and you're now trying to get guilt out of them. And again, it's different situations. If you're a security officer and you catch someone shoplifting and you bring them in the office and you ask them some questions, it's another when a police officer arrests someone and then a detective is actually interrogating them and trying to get them to admit guilt. Okay, discuss the seriousness of the incident with the person being interrogated. So obviously you want to make sure they understand that it isn't a game and you're not playing around, that this is something that's important. Request that the subject tell the story. And you want them to tell the story multiple times, because that's how you catch someone giving you misinformation. The story seems just a little bit different every time they tell it, then more than likely you are getting someone who is trying to fabricate a story on the fly, so you want to be aware of that. Appeal to the emotions of the subject. Let him or her know that everybody makes mistakes. Allow the subject to rationalize what they've done. Allow them to minimize the harm that occurred. Allow them to project blame onto someone else. Now, what does that all mean? What that basically means is, if you are trying to get someone to admit guilt, the last thing you want them to do is feel that what they've done is so bad that they should never admit it. In other words, Mr. Suspect, I know that everybody gets upset. And I mean, that guy was probably egging you on. Like several witnesses said you punched him, but I think there was a situation where he probably insulted your manhood, didn't he? Yeah, I can understand that. And who wouldn't do what you did if that happened to them? So sometimes people have it coming, don't they? And these things allow a person to drop their guard and start thinking that they're justified in their behavior. And then that's when they say, yeah, I did this because he was inappropriate. He should have never said that to me. He should have treated me with more respect. So that is something that you want to keep in mind. Point out inconsistencies in the story to the subject. The more that you put the pressure on a suspect to have them feeling that they really have no other option but just to tell the truth, and that's what happens every time you point out an inconsistency, every time you point out something that isn't quite right, that person starts feeling like, okay, this isn't working. This whole lying thing just simply isn't working. So I'm gonna go ahead and just tell the truth, and then confront the subject with the part with part of the evidence. Now, you want to be careful because you don't want to present them with so much information that you've now given them insight into what you have, and then give them opportunity to create a different story or a different narrative. So be careful with that. But these are just little pointers that if you were ever in this situation, these are some of the ideas that you'd want to have if you were interrogating a suspect. All right, so that's all I have for this topic today. For Job Corps, I'm Petty Officer Romero. I look forward to seeing you guys in class, and we'll talk to you next video.
Tell me what you gonna do, what you gonna do. Yeah. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you?